Hi, and welcome to another AOGP Scientology Outside of the Church podcast. This is season 6, episode 7. I'm here with Quentin Stroud, my co host. We are going to do part 2 of what Scientology believes, independent Scientology for us. We are outside of the church, obviously, because that's the title of the podcast. So we're going to jump right into it, get going here. We're going to cover first the grade chart, which is also the chart of awareness or the bridge to total freedom. And that this is going to take a little bit of time. You want to start this or you want me to?
Well, I want you to start it, and I want to jump in key points because obviously going up the bridge is what we as Scientologists work towards, right? Our goal is to move up this bridge toward total freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? No, I'll start with the lower levels, right?
Okay.
So obviously, when we talk about moving up a bridge to total freedom, well, what is that? Why is that even a big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about moving up the bridge, and you hear Scientologists say, "I'm going up the bridge," or "My goal is to get up the bridge." What we're saying is moving ourselves up this chart of awareness characteristics. That's really what it is. Now, at different points on this bridge, at different places on the bridge, there's different things that one is um, capable of achieving, one is capable of doing, one might be capable of perceiving, and it just kind of depends on each individual. One thing I love about Scientology is that it makes it available to the individual to make their move up the bridge based on where they are, based on what they need, based on how fast they're ready to go, whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Me personally, and I can just speak from my personal experience, when I first discovered Scientology back 20 some odd years ago, it was it resonated with me very, very quickly. It rang true for me very, very quickly. And even growing up as a in a very religious household, Christian household, like it rang for me very truly like this is a methodology. This is a way to get a person free.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw that, it totally rang true for me. Now, don't get me wrong, I still had my own beliefs. I still had my own religious practice at the time. That okay, that was true too. You know what I mean? But this to me had a more logical flow. It had a more A to B flow. So when you start at the lower levels of the bridge, these are just where a person might be indicating that they might need help. They might need help with something. They might need to take a course. They might need to learn more about what this whole thing is all about. But there's some kind of reach to get some help. There's some kind of reach to make some changes in their life. That's usually where most people enter in on the bridge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whether it be through certain courses, whether it be through getting some introductory Dianetics auditing, book one auditing, that might be where they start in, if possible. I know a lot of people have gotten a lot of wins starting in like just reading the book Dianetics or reading the book Self-Analysis. Self-analysis was a really, really good way to get a lot of people just kind of getting started to realize like I can recall things, I can see things, and I can know things that I didn't realize I can know, you
Mm-hmm.
know, about myself. Self-analysis. And so moving up the bridge, I believe, is one of the fundamental beliefs of Scientologists. And when you say what do Scientologists believe, well, the bridge is going to break that down. I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, and there are several different entry points on the bridge, and the reason why it's called the bridge, what does a bridge do? It takes you from one side of a chasm or a gulf to the other side, gets you to the other side. Well, that's why Hubbard called it the bridge to total freedom. And at the bottom of it, there are lots of entry points. Like you said, there's self analysis. You could do the purification rundown, handle drugs.
Mhm.
These are all places where people are in need of change. They want
Mhm.
to change. They're like, I need to do something. I need to get my life straightened out. So there's a handful of these things. One of them is communication. They can do a communications course and do our communication drills, which we call TRs or training regimens. that can be life changing for people that
Yeah.
can't communicate. The professional course for those very same communication drills saved my life, and I think I've mentioned this in another podcast. But it can save your life and allow you to handle any situation, no matter how rough, with communication alone. And a lot of people need this because they can't even look each
Mm-hmm.
other in the eye. And that's
Yeah.
the very beginnings of the bridge to total freedom. That's one of the steps. So when you get to need for change, then you move up the scale of awareness, and the bridge is set up in such a way that it is a very, very shallow gradient approach, that as you do these steps, your awareness increases nice and slow. It's not too fast. It's a very simple thing to do, and you progress through your purification rundown. If you have a drug history, your objectives, which get you in present time, and
Mm-hmm.
allow you to handle the environment around you. If you're one of these people who are like, wow, that object was sitting there for all these years and I never realized that it was there. Well, you're not in present time. The objectives help you with that. Then we get on to the Scientology drug rundown. Scientology drug rundown handles the spiritual side of the effects of drugs on you after you've handled the physical side with the purification rundown. You have the happiness rundown for people whose lives are in disorder, which is based off of the way to happiness. That's an optional step. The last couple of these are optional depending on what state you're in. Did you want to say something?
No, continue.
Okay. And then after that, you have ARC Straightwire, which is helping you recall things and improve your memory, and is also, the dual purpose of it is to run Dianetic locks off
Mm-hmm.
of your case so that you can get more gains and you're not so over stimulated on things. It's a wonderful level, and the end result of that is knowing that you will not get any worse in life. That's a hell of a thing.
Yeah. And what's interesting, because even as you were going through these different points of the bridge, I was kind of recalling, some of these really, really, I'm going to use the word salvific
Mm-hmm.
moments for me. You said it saved your life, talking about the communication course
Yeah.
and doing communication, like understanding communication. It saved your life. Let me tell you something, and I'm going to just real quickly. Back in 2000, I first discovered Scientology in Minneapolis back in 2002. And shortly after that, I had just read one book. Shortly after that, my whole life was in shambles. I was living in my car. I was totally out, like pretty much destitute. I
Mm-hmm.
did have a job, but I could not get on my feet. This is
Mm-hmm.
what I literally experienced. I could not get on my feet, as it were, societally. And no matter, I tried to get apartments, I tried to get places. I finally got a friend of mine, who was actually a coworker at the time, a coworker of mine who later became my friend, to let me stay at her house. And she let me sleep in her son's, oh, I'm getting emotional talking about it. She let me sleep in her son's 5-year-old son's bed, and he had like a race car bed.
Mm-hmm.
I was a grown man sleeping in a race car bed of a 5-year-old child. He had to sleep in the bed with his mother. And that was my life at that time, 2000, 2003, 2004.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I got enough money together. I had corrected some stuff in my experience. Not doing any Scientology yet. Just I had read one book, and then I had to pull it all together. In 2006 is when I decided that I'm going to start to get myself free. I'm going to start to go clear. And that's where I entered in on the bridge. And I started with Dianetics. So the first book I read was New Stance on Life. The second book I read was Dianetics. And didn't even finish the book. But what I read, I knew that this would work for me. And that's when we started running it. 400 hours. We just every day, almost every day, we would go in. Um, as I continued to go up the bridge, all of these gains started happening for me.
Mhm.
The communication thing changed my life when it came to money. I was able to communicate with people about what I needed and wanted. I was able to look somebody in the eye. Literally, this literally happened to me. I was sitting across the table from a gentleman at a hotel. He was the owner of 3 hotels, a part of a franchise. And I sat on the table with him and I talked to him. And I had to be 20 something years old, kid. And I told him I could help increase his business.
Mhm.
And I looked him in the face and I talked about him, how I didn't have any materials. All I had was a piece of paper and a pen. And I closed this man, and he was a heavy set gentleman. He folded his arms across his belly and set them on top of his belly. And he reached into his pocket, his jacket pocket, pulled out his checkbook and wrote a check and slid it across the table like that. And he said to me, "Is that enough to start?" And it was a check for $106,000. I had never seen that much money in my life. And all I did was communicate. That's all I did. Me, my mouth, and a piece of paper and a pen. And I told him how I could help him. And he wrote me a check for $106,000. And I had to build a team. I had to do a whole bunch of stuff that he needed me to do. But he just slid across the table. Is that enough to start? I'm telling you, when you're in a place where you need to change your life, and you find something like this that
Mhm.
can help you change your life where you're living in your car. I had to go to the gym to take a shower. I had a gym membership. That's all I
Mhm.
had.
Mhm.
I had to go to the gym to take a shower. When you get to a place where this can change, this is okay. I'm done. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's
Jeez.
those are the dramatic changes that can happen just in a moment with
Well, boy.
communication. And it very much with Dianetics and Scientology, it is like Hubbard says, it is miracles as usual, miracles for breakfast.
Yes.
So this is what the bridge is about, is there are things that are palpable and things that aren't palpable. And the reason they aren't palpable is because you have to get in these earlier steps on the
Hmm.
bridge or the grade chart. And when you get these earlier steps in and you do it on a gradient, you find that you have more and more awareness, more and more ability, more and more confront, to look at things and handle things that you would have never handled in the past. And this ability keeps going and going and going. And the gains that you get, the wins that you get, increase in size. You get more charge off of your case, out of your reactive mind, as you progress. Now, on the levels above the drug rundown and ARC straight wire, next would be the grades, which are grade
Hmm.
0 through 4, and then new era Dianetics. These handle grade 0 is for communication, 1 is for help and problems. And then grade 2 is overts and withholds, things you've done to others, others have done to you, all done on 4 flows of others to you to others, others to others, you to yourself. And grade 2 is where the line of demarcation really increases on responsibility level, and you start taking control of things in your life, and you're no longer nearly as much of a victim. Then you get up to
Mm.
change and ARC breaks on level 3. Level 4 on the grade chart, or grade 4. Level 4 is if you're an auditor. Grade 4, level 4 auditor audits grade 4, for example. Then you're
Hmm.
handling on grade 4 the things that you use to be a victim, and how you use these things to make others wrong and yourself right in order to survive. We call these service facsimiles. They are engrams that you use to make yourself right. And it is the crux of a case for most people.
Yeah.
Now, after you get done with that, you're all set up and you can do metered Dianetics, new era Dianetics. And this handles your locks, your secondaries, and engrams, and we readdress those service facsimiles as actual engrams using what you came up with on grade 4. And at some point, the person goes clear. Now,
Hmm.
On the grade chart, after clear, once you get the state finalized and everything, clear is a great, 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 great start. And you're far above what you would I'm not trying to diminish this. And for people who are Scientologists listening to this, I'm not doing a technical degrade. I'm just keeping it real. Clear is far above other people in the society who have not done these steps. And at this point in time, you're going to see things completely differently than you did when you started at the bottom of the bridge, on the lower end of the bridge. And you're going to be astounded at what you see every day. You're going to feel completely different, and you're going to be able to do something about it. But at the same time, now you've opened Pandora's box. Now you're in the big leagues. You have to learn how to solo audit and take responsibility for your case. And once the best auditor you can have per LRH Hubbard is you. Once you learn how to solo audit, once you learn how to solo audit, now you can be responsible for what's going on in your life and go in session and handle it. And you start to realize, once you begin solo auditing on what we call the OT levels, the operating Thetan levels, 1, 2, and 3, you start to realize that there's a lot more to this universe than you ever thought or you were ever aware of. And the expansion in beingness, the expansion in awareness, the expansion in knowingness, the expansion in causativeness, and the ability to make your postulates, your decisions stick throughout these levels is exponential in size. Mm-hmm. There are certain things that have occurred in this universe throughout time, and this is where you get into the whole track and everything. And we're going to do a whole podcast on this later on next month. So I won't get into it too much, but what you're doing with the grade chart on the OT levels is you are handling chunks of reactive mind, not yours, but of the composite case, that which you are a part of, to the degree that you are going to fundamentally change in ways that you haven't been in millennia or trillinia, or even further. And you start to realize that anything you want to do, anything that you have a problem with, you can be at cause over. Anything that happens to you, you caused. And you could start causing other things, not the negative things. So the grade chart is the series of steps all the way up to new OT 7. And that's where the last thing that Hubbard did. We here at AOGP also deliver levels above that based off of research that was done beyond what Hubbard did. And we also deliver those by a gentleman by the name of, lovingly called Captain Bill Robertson, who was on the ship that Hubbard owned and was the captain of that ship. He was a Class 8 auditor, and he and a bunch of other Class 8 auditors left the church in the early 80s when they saw that the signs of the church had been taken over, and they did research into areas beyond that. We give people the option to do that, and we explain to them, why this would be beneficial. And I can say without any reservation, they are very, very, very beneficial, because after you've gotten all that charge off of what Hubbard researched, there's more to it than that. You don't have to do it. It's your choice. But when you run out of road, you're going to go, there's more to this.
What that was going to be my question / input on the matter, because obviously when you have something this extensive, like the bridge to total freedom and all those things you just delineated, one might feel like there's so much to do, or there's so far to go, for me to get better or whatever. And I look at it like this. I look at it like, if one had a physical malady, a physical issue, and one had to go to physical therapy, you had to step, and like you had to learn to walk again, or whatever. It feels to me, it feels almost like that. It feels like, as a being, I might have to learn to walk again. I might have to learn to postulate again. I
Yeah,
might have to,
that's what it
I might
is.
have to free some of that stuff off of me so that I can be me again. And so, yes, is the auditor sitting with you and you're sitting there across from the auditor and you guys are going in and it's like step, step, and you got to ask me this question again? You got to
Mhm,
go over it again,
mhm,
this kind of stuff, right? But to me, it feels like spiritual rehab. It feels like spiritual physical therapy or for spiritual therapy, where you're learning to do that little walk again. You're learning to move those muscles that you haven't moved in quite some time, or they have been damaged over years of being battered and beat up or whatever case may be. So and I'm just sharing this from the perspective of somebody who might be new to Scientology, and you seeing this thing for the first time, this bridge, and somebody's sitting across from you and says, okay, now we got to get you in session. What does that mean, right? It
mhm,
means let's get you to learn how to move through these levels, how to move up the bridge, how to get yourself to a place where you can function as a being
mhm,
operating Thetan, and you are good on that 100% per your own estimation, not somebody telling you that, oh, I believe, thank God, I believe. No, it's that you know that you know that you know that you can do what you know you can do. And it's fantastic. So as we're talking about what does Scientology believe, the bridge is something that is so fundamental to understanding how to move yourself up through this process. And I'm glad we got a chance to really talk about it with you today.
mhm. Well, and it's important to note that in auditing and on the bridges, nobody's telling you what to believe.
Yeah.
You find these things out for yourself unequivocally, and it is done in such a way that is unprecedented on this planet. There's no evaluation, there's no invalidation. Auditors have an auditor's code, and they abide by it. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, and in the beginning, you can't talk about some of the things that you've done. Well, that's what auditing handles on the lower end of the bridge. It gets you to be able to talk to the auditor, get these things off, take responsibility for them, own your own shit, basically, to be blunt. And
Mhm.
you become aware of the fact that you are a spiritual being and you've been around for a mighty long time, and you've gotten yourself into some predicaments, and you've talked yourself into being, doing, and having things that you shouldn't have because you were just trying to survive. And that's the end goal, is getting you to realize who you really are and what your true potential was, can be, and is. And let me tell you, it is totally different than anything you've ever experienced. It is not expressible in words. And I beg you and I beseech our listeners to apprise yourself of this situation while you can, and the opportunity is here. Read a book, get some free
Yeah.
Dianetic auditing from us, experience it yourself. And if it's true for you, it's true for you. If it isn't, we respect that, and we're not going to force it down your throat. But I think you'll find that if you're honest with yourself, you will get more out of this than you ever thought you could possibly conceive going up the bridge.
Well, and as you talk about getting to know self, obviously, in Scientology, another thing that Scientologists believe is about the eight dynamics.
Mm-hmm,
And, as we talk about all of these abilities and all of this awareness and knowing who you are, the eight dynamics is something that I thought was a breakthrough in understanding myself, at least when I first discovered it, because I could see my life in these certain segments, these
mm-hmm.
certain ways. Like this segment is this, but this segment, I don't know about that one, whatever. So let's talk about the eight dynamics real quick, since we're talking about who I am. Do you want to start?
Well, there are eight dynamics, and Hubbard considered having a few other dynamics early on, but these are the different walks of life. You've got you yourself, your second dynamic, which is you, your parents, your kids, your significant other. Third dynamic would be a group, maybe who you work with, maybe your religion, maybe a book club. Fourth dynamic would be concerning everybody on the planet, or even further. Just depending on what your awareness is. spiritually or otherwise. It could be considered part of a fourth dynamic. And then you move on up through these other concentric circles on the outside, all the way up to quote unquote the eight dynamic, which encompasses all of the others, or the spiritual dynamic. And down below that, you've got the physical universe, you've got animals, all this stuff. So these are all things that you have to be in communication with. It's not just like we talked about last week in the prosperity podcast. It's not, you're not in communication.
All about you.
Yeah, you're not in if you're not in communication with all of these dynamics, and it's just I, me, mine, you're going to be very unhappy. You're not going to do real well in life, and the future does not bode well for thee.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of these things, and we have fundamental actions that you can do. Where we mentioned last week as well that you have conditions by dynamics, ethics conditions. What condition are you in on the first dynamic? What condition are you in on the third dynamic? And you go back and you clear these things up, handling conditions that you didn't know, where you screwed up on things, could have done better, didn't know that you could do anything else. Get these things straightened up on your dynamics, figure out what condition you're in on these dynamics. We've got exchange by dynamics. What does your first dynamic give your second dynamic? What does your second dynamic give your first? What is your first dynamic give your third dynamic? Okay, now what is your, and this isn't the sequence, but for the sake of the conversation, what is your third dynamic give your first dynamic? Well, I mean, think about that for a minute. What does your third dynamic give your first dynamic? And what do you give as a first dynamic your third dynamic? And then you continue on to this. What does your first dynamic give the eighth dynamic? The spiritual dynamic. Okay, so you have to sit there and you have to go, okay, hold on. And the interesting thing is, in regards to the bridge to total freedom, and as your awareness increases and you get more and more auditing and training, you look at these things one way now, but as you go up the bridge and your awareness increases, you'll go back and you'll read them and you'll go, hey, wait a minute. Did I ever read this? Because I feel completely differently about this, and you see things in a completely different light. So what you do at the bottom of the bridge and what you do at the top of the bridge with the eight dynamics is eventually you go, oh, I get it. There is a sixth, seventh, and eighth dynamic, and I have to be on those as well. And you have to operate on all of them and have them in communication with each other, because if you don't and they're cut off, you're going to be stuck in an eddy in the stream, and you're not going to progress, because you have to take responsibility for these things. We talked about KRC podcast before last, and knowledge, responsibility, and control over your eight dynamics are key.
Yeah.
So that, I think, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think that is so powerful. When I first discovered this, it's so powerful because when we talk about these eight dynamics and these ways of seeing your life unfolding, like it's literally happening every single day. Like you're dealing with these things all the time, whether it be family members, whether it be friends or coworkers, whether it be just people, at the mall or wherever you are out at the grocery store. Like you're dealing with these things every single day, and yet we never think about how that random person at the grocery store actually exists as a part of my existence, right? As a cooperative component. Because get this, if you're somewhere and that one person decides to go buck wild crazy and starts doing some stuff in that mall or whatever, knock on wood, but if that person starts, you're going to be affected. It would totally impact you on some level that this is happening if that person decides to go ham. And so I think it's really important that we don't see ourselves as existing, especially as Scientologists, we don't see ourselves existing in this vacuum. We see ourselves as multidimensional, multi-dynamical. Is that a word? I don't know.
Dynamical. Yep.
Multi-dynamical being, where like you are existing across all of these things simultaneously. And if you don't know how to communicate across your dynamics, if you don't know how to have, like you said, exchange across your dynamics, if you don't know how to understand and see that this is a part of my dynamics, it will not be good for you to be able to exist on planet Earth,
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to keep bumping into walls, problems, issues, shit, stuff that's going to not feel good, because I don't know, or I have not yet discovered for myself how to move in and through these things effortlessly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for me, as I continue to go up the bridge, as I continue to study, as I continue to learn, as I continue to get auditing, it creates this level for me to be able to now move through these and handle my dynamics well.
Right.
That's what it feels like.
You come to find out that, you know, the expression "pay it forward"
Mm,
becomes an important thing. You know, this is why attorneys do pro bono work, you know, that type of a thing. It is, you have
mhm,
to look at, okay, I need to take care of these other things as well. You know, I have 7
mhm.
cats, 8 birds, 2 dogs, and that's a dynamic there. And if I quite literally, ever since I was a kid, and my dad explained the dynamics to me, if I see an earthworm that's drowning in a pool after a rain and it's alive, I'll pull it out of there and go put it someplace safe, because
So,
the viewpoint is, you know, and this is biblical, but it applies, is, you know, do unto others as you would have done unto you, whether they're the
mhm.
animal kingdom or it's your physical possessions. You take care of things, they run better, they work better, they last better. All of this stuff is being in communication with your dynamics.
Yeah, and I don't have pets, but I do have a plant. Here's my little plant,
Yeah.
right? I have a little plant. And lately we found these little bugs, like these little wormy things, like centipedes almost, that were on the plants. And I saved them. We saved them in a little thing right here. And I didn't want to squish them and kill them. Whatever. This is to say that one cannot, squash a roach or whatever. Listen, but understanding the dynamics helps you move through them a lot easier.
Hmm.
And like, where I live, chicken is a really big thing, chickens.
Hmm.
And if there's a issue with the chickens, there's an issue, right? If there's an issue with the pork, if there's an issue with, what are you seeing these things in grocery stores,
Hmm.
something in the pork, salmonella and this, that, and the other, botulism and such, tomatoes got recalled because tomatoes had E. coli on them or something. Like, you got to understand that all of these things exist as a part of your 8 dynamics. And when you understand how they flow and how to function in them, you can take mastery over them. And I
Hmm.
love that word, mastery. You can take mastery over your own dynamics, and you can start to move through them very, very well. You mentioned earlier about the KRC triangle when we did the podcast. Go back and listen to that podcast on KRC, by the way. But you talked about the KRC triangle. Well, as a part of one of the fundamental beliefs of Scientology is the ARC triangle,
Hmm.
right? The ARC triangle. And even as we talk about the dynamics, as we talk about the going up the bridge, the ARC triangles is a pretty big
Yeah.
deal in how it kind of flows and how it works.
Hmm.
Tell us about more about that. Like, how does the ARC triangle, how do we deal with that on the lower grades? And then as we go up, what happens to our ARC triangle?
Well, that's interesting because,
And what is the ARC triangle?
well, first off, let's simplify and move over to what we call the chart of attitudes, or the tone scale. The tone
Mhm,
scale is a chart that Hubbard developed early on, 1951, uh, with the book Science of Survival and the chart of human evaluation, and then the tone scale came after that because it was part of it in the beginning. And the tone scale is a chart of attitudes, all the way from hiding all the way up to complete knowingness and aesthetics, games, postulates, all this stuff at the top end. Well, it turns out that those emotional tone levels are varying degrees of affinity, reality, and communication, which equals understanding. ARC makes a triangle. You can put the letters on any corner you want of this imaginary triangle. And in the middle, you have understanding if you have ARC for something. So if you see somebody that is in hiding,
mhm,
Are they in affinity, reality, and communication with their environment, and are they understanding? Not
Not at all.
really.
They're withdrawing from it. Yeah.
Right. So that would be the absolute bottom of affinity, reality, and communication. Did you just think of something?
Yes. But go ahead. Continue.
So, and then you go all the way up the scale and you get to 2.0 on the tone scale above anger, and you get into conservatism and boredom and mild interest and all of this. Well, these are all varying degrees of ARC, and there's two types of tone levels that a person has per the Science of Survival book where this all started. Is you've got the social tone level, which is, hi, how you been? Oh, I missed you so much. I love you. Oh, on and on. And then you've got the chronic tone
That's the
level,
tone level.
where where that's really where the person is at. So
Yeah.
these are
Chronic tone level.
two states, chronic and social tone level. Social is the veneer that you see with people, and then at the bottom of it is when you get to know somebody for 5 years, then you know what you're dealing with.
But let me tell you something. I grew up in Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about some social veneer
Oh
and
my
you talk about,
God. Yep.
hey, baby, how you doing? Oh, you look just like your mama. Oh, go in, go down the road there. And then not 4 minutes, 2 minutes later, by you get down the road, child, you know that ain't his baby. Now you know, you know that ain't Larry baby.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm
There it is. That's right. That's right.
oh
So
my gosh.
there's different types of ARC depending on which tone level you're using. And ARC is the key building block to wait for it, the 8 dynamics and the bridge to total freedom. Because
Mhm.
as you become more aware, your ARC, your understanding of the universe around you, yourself and other people, expands and
Oh
expands
my
and
gosh.
expands. And at that same
Yes.
time, your social tone level increases. You find yourself
Mhm.
not loathing your neighbors and your friends as much. You want to get along with them. You're not nattering about them, which is what you were demonstrating there a minute ago. As soon as they get
Right.
further down the road, uh, and you start to take more responsibility, you start to appreciate people, you start to love people more, you start to love yourself a whole lot more, because now you have more ARC understanding for all of those things, yourself included, and you can do something about it. To the degree that you have affinity, reality, and communication with things, well, now you're more at cause. That's what ARC
Yeah.
is. Now, these two triangles, the KRC triangle that we talked about the other day, these two triangles are interconnected. You cannot have knowledge, responsibility, and control and power in the top triangle
Without
without the ARC triangle. It's obvious.
affinity, reality, communication. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not possible. And to the degree that your ARC is high is to the degree that you have an understanding, and now you can take control, and now you can take responsibility for it, and now you're that much more of a powerful person once you get all of these blocks out of the way on the bridge to total freedom. It is
Yes.
miraculous how well it works, and they're very, very simple concepts. Lots of auditing commands on ARC to broaden your depth on it, and getting overts and withholds off prevents you from withholding from things, so that your ARC is higher, and you want to
Mhm.
reach for things. You can have things, you can postulate things. Your IQ goes up tremendously. That's something I didn't mention on the bridge to
Mhm.
total freedom, because now you're in ARC with yourself, your environment, and as a being in the theta universe, not the physical universe.
Well, and because you're communicating with you're communicating with your environment because you see things and you have a reality of things that are, and
Mm-hmm.
you see it as is, right? You
That's
like
right.
it's not some kind of warped, visual or warped viewpoint on things. Like you can see things as is. Of course, your IQ goes up. IQ is a measure of how you use intelligence. It's
Mm-hmm.
how you see patterns in things. If you're taking the IQ test, you see the patterns and you say this is to this as that is to this, whatever. You can see these things more clearly clearly as you increase your ARC, when ARC goes up. And so now one's IQ literally becomes better because now I can see the pattern. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever looked at your life and you've been in the same been going through the same thing over and over and over again? You've been in the same relationship, just a different person, same script, different cast. You go through this stuff over and over again, and you don't really see the pattern. But then you get a little freedom, you get a little clarity, you get a little awareness, you have a little conversation or whatever, and you can see the pattern now, and you can then become cause over it. You become cause over these screwed up patterns in your life. And this, what I feel, and what's been my experience, is the ARC triangle. It helped me to see things differently and to understand people and myself better, and to have a greater affinity for those that I said it before. I like people who like me. You know what I mean? And you get this affinity for people. Like, I can feel that they love me. I can feel this, and it's not something that I have to guess at. He loves me? He loves me not. He loves me. Come on.
Right.
But when you can know that you know, oh, it's fantastic. ARC triangle.
Yeah.
You kind of. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, that's fine.
No, I was going to go into something else. Go ahead.
Finish your flow. The concept of affinity is the amount of affinity that you can have for things is exponential. And to the degree that you can have affinity for something is to the degree that you can have a reality on it, to the degree that you can be in communication with it. You enter in from any one of these 3 points with somebody. If you're in sales and you say, you know, and I mean this genuinely, I don't mean this as a smarmy kind of thing in sales. But you generally, you get into communication with somebody and you find a common reality. And then once you find a common reality, the affinity comes up with that person. And then you really start striking up a good conversation, and you get along with the person. And that's how you develop friends and relationships, is using the ARC triangle to have understanding of things, not only with people, but with subjects. And that's when in study, what are you doing when you're studying something? Well, you're getting that information, and as you get it and you understand it, you have more affinity for it, you have more understanding for it, it's real to you, you can communicate it to other people, and then you get into the KRC triangle. You can take that data and you can apply it to yourself and to others, and you can help yourself and others restore power and raise power in their lives. And this is something that you can do without any auditing at all. You just need to understand how to strike up a conversation with somebody. Hey, that's a really nice car you got there. What year is that? And off to the races you go. I mean, or anything. You say, you know, I really love fireworks. I love those purple ones. You do? I do too. Well, there you go. And that's how you get your foot in the door. But you've got to be able to confront them. You've got to be able to say something. You've got to be able to communicate. That's why we have communications courses at the bottom of this Bridge to Total Freedom, as an example. So moving on.
Well, I was going to say real quickly before we go to the next subject, because you kind of touched on something in this conversation that we didn't have on the list, but you talked about the tone scale, right? And I think it's really important to just kind of give a brief moment to that too, because one of the things that many of us have trouble with is knowing who we can trust, knowing how people are going to respond or behave in a certain way based on, you just don't know. And that can create anxiety, that can create this trepidation and reaching out or whatever. I literally was talking to a client earlier today, and she's like, I just don't want to do the wrong thing that ruins my relationship. And I said, well, what do you, this relationship with this guy? I said, what do you mean? And she was like, well, because I don't want to say too much, or I don't want to give him too much emotion. I don't want to, so on her own, like, volition. She's like, he hasn't said anything to her. Like, she didn't feel safe to share with him her authenticity, her truth at all times, because she doesn't know if he can handle it. And I had to kind of kind of plot him on the tone scale a little bit and let her know where he was on the tone scale based on observation and how to deal with him. And all I did was just go across the
Right.
tones, just go across the chart. Like at this tone level, this person can have this, this, and this. He cannot have such and such and so and so. So do not talk to him about these deep emotional traumas of your past.
Right.
Just talk to him about chicken. He wants some
Hmm.
chicken. Give him some chicken.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
whatever.
and that's what's neat about the chart of human ability is if you can
Yes,
roughly
that's
spot
what
where
it's
the
called.
person's tone level is, you've got a litany of all of these things where and some they're not going to necessarily be all the way across the boards or along that column, but there might be a few up and below, and it kind of sine waves up and down. And if you spot their chronic tone level, well, then you're really going to get an accurate understanding of where they're at and how you can communicate with them. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of entry points there with the chart of human evaluation on what to do with a particular tone level. You're not just out in the wild on your own, because Hubbard was a really smart guy and he plotted this out for you, and you can refer to it on your phone. We have it on our website.
It's very extensive.
Yeah, and the book Science of Survival is the owner's manual to that chart, and he goes into heavy detail on each one of those tone levels and what they're going to do. So it's not just a chart, it's a book with a chart is what it is. And this came out in 1951-52, and there's never
Yeah.
been anything else like it on the planet to this day. Interestingly enough, the church's version, the corporate church of Scientology's version, has been, and our listeners need to know this, has been heavily changed. Know this, come to our website, get a first or second edition in PDF format. You can find them also on eBay. They're a little pricey because they're collector's editions, but we do have the PDFs, and it's super important that you get, and this is a good segue over to our next topic. It's super important in Dianetics and independent Scientology that you get the accurate information. You don't get changed information because of copyrights or manipulation by the corporate church of Scientology. They've taken things out because they don't want you to know about them. Hardest thing to spot as a missing is you'd never know it was there in the first place. So this brings us to one of the things that we view, quote unquote, believe and or know, and that is that Hubbard is, quote unquote, source.
Yes.
And this is very, very important for somebody who wants to do something professionally. I like to do anything I do professionally. And to be professional, you have to have accurate, true information. Without it, you got nothing. And this was Hubbard's viewpoint. People like to change things either because they want to get creative and they want to put their own twist on it. They have misunderstood words about it. I mean, you see this all the time. And he talks about this ad nauseum throughout 30 years of lectures. And it is a no-no. And this is why we exist in the first place as an independent Scientology organization, is because the church changed so much stuff that it was becoming unworkable.
Yeah. You know, I even got to go to the whole professional thing, and to be professional, you got to do all. I remember when I was in school, we had that thing called telephone. Remember that game called telephone?
Mm-hmm.
And you get all the students lined up in a row, and you start one, and you tell them one, and then you tell the next, and the next one tell the next one, next one. By the time you get to the end, it's something totally different. Like, what are we talking about again?
Right.
And so I totally get it. If you want to do something right, you got to do it in a professional manner. You got to have the accurate total data, the source of who originated this material, whatever. And so in Scientology, LRH is referred to as source because LRH is the founder of this track, of this religion, of this group. And so with that information, with LRH's teachings, with LH's words, with LH's writings, with LH's lectures, you have access to source. If it has been changed, if it has been scratched out here and the word changed there, and we move the paragraph to that paragraph or whatever, what ends up happening is there's a different context that could come out from what is really being contextually understood. conceptually understood. And so it does kind of change things a bit, and lot bit, not a little bit, a lot bit. And it makes it so that, like you said, it could become unworkable by
Mhm.
the time we got to the end of the telephone line.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the thing that you see, the technology is so damn workable that even though the church has changed things, people still get results. That's, to me, is the hallmark of how intelligent and the research line was that Hubbard did. He spent his entire almost his entire life, especially, the better part of his life, writing this stuff down, getting it on paper and saying, if you do this, you'll get these results. Just follow my directions. And even though the church has changed it, people still get wins and gains. It's all relative, but they could be getting a lot more wins and gains without suppression, because what's happened inside the church, just as an extremely short side rail, is what you see now with the corporate church of Scientology is the data has been changed. It has been open to interpretation, and you're not seeing what Hubbard intended. This needs to be gotten across so that people understand and they don't vilify Scientology, the subject, because they don't know anything other than what they see in the media. And if you believe anything the media says these days, you're come on, come on. After COVID, really? I mean, it's pretty obvious. So you don't want to take a rumor line in a game of telephone. You want to get it from source, and that's what Hubbard was all about. Was he doesn't say he's a god. He says, I'm just a guy like you are, who found these things out, distilled this information down, found out what was workable, got rid of what wasn't, and if you do this, you'll get these results, and they're fabulous, fabulous results.
So you mentioned this, right? Oh my God, it's so good because we do refer to LRH as source. And I was gonna ask the question, well, do we do we worship LRH? Is LRH like a prophet? Like, because you people,
Mhm.
like literally, people have said like they call it Scientology scripture. I think we talked about that in the earlier part of this conversation about I think the last podcast. I said, is there such thing as Scientology scripture in the
Mhm.
whole bit, right? And so it kind of is this thing where do do you feel we worship LRH? And I want to give my viewpoint on that, and then you go. But you go first, and I'm gonna give my viewpoint.
Okay. When I was in training at Flag in 1988, we would have um, Friday night graduation. They still have it, to my knowledge, and that would
Mhm,
be where any of the students who graduated a course would get up and they would say something, and you would have a litany of people at the time, because there was 150 people in the course room at the time, and you might have somebody coming to do a special speech from in the Sea Org or something about, they spent time with LRH type of thing. That was always fun and interesting. And then at the end of it, there's a bust that they had in the course room. I don't know if they still have it or not, but it was one that LRH had done of him, and it was a bronze bust. And then we would do 3 hip hip hoorays to LRH and clap to this
mhm,
bus.
mhm.
I always felt a little uncomfortable about that. I thought it was unusual. Don't get me wrong. I think LRH is a genius, and though he's no longer the being known as LRH, L. Ron Hubbard, uh, I completely respect that guy. He has changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. But I don't view him as a god. I don't view him as a saint. I view him as a being that had really bright ideas, knew how to do things with those bright ideas and make them available and accessible to everybody, because he was so experienced as a writer and articulate as a writer, because he did it so much, 30,000, 40,000 hours writing before Scientology. So he was definitely a professional. And that's the thing, is that he could communicate. If there was any godlike quality that he has, read one of his sci-fi novels, especially Battlefield Earth or Mission Earth. You will not see a better form of communication in the form of science fiction than those books. And all of his peers felt and feel the same way. Any of them that are still around.
Yeah.
There's very, very few.
So I love how you said that. Because I want to talk about him as a science fiction writer too. But what's interesting is that when you really clear the word worship, right? The word worship is a state of being, like a friendship is a state of being a friend.
Mhm.
Relationship is a state of being in relation to another person.
Yep.
Companionship is, is a state of being, something like that. And worship is the state of being worthy.
Mhm.
And so when somebody asks, well, do y'all worship LRH? I said, well, he did a lot for a lot of people. And if somebody commits over half their life, if not more, a greater part of their life, to giving somebody such an amazing, robust body of work, 4,000 plus lectures, many, many books, both fiction writing books and Scientological books, like that person is worthy of a hip hip hooray. That person
Mhm.
is worthy.
Mhm. Yeah. Well,
It's worthy of a state of being. And let me just say this, because nobody balks when you got a Beyonce video or Beyonce poster or whatever
good.
on the
Good
wall
point. Good
and
point.
whatever. Nobody balks at that.
Mhm.
When you got a Michael Jackson, people will scream, cry, fall out, pass out just
Yeah.
to touch his hand.
Yeah.
Nobody balked at that. That was normal because they were called
Mhm.
fans. They were fanatics, right?
Mhm.
Fans.
Mhm.
But somebody standing up and saying, hip, hip, hooray. That's wonderful. Thanks, LRH, for this technology. People say, oh, y'all worshiping this. Listen, he's worthy.
Mhm.
For what he was able to accomplish. That when if you were in the room with in fact in Walmart, real quick, I'm just being a little bit whatever right now, but if you were at Walmart, they still have pictures of Sam Walton in the back room, and at the end of each muster,
Yep.
at the end of each whatever, they clap the hand and whatever, they blow kisses, whatever the people do with Sam Walton, they still have the pictures up.
Mhm.
I was at Wegmans in America. I was at Wegmans. Wegmans had the picture of them right at the beginning. And Mr. Wegmans sitting right at the beginning of when you walk into the store, he
Mhm.
welcoming you in. Come on into, I built this store for you. Mr. Wegmans says,
Mhm.
whatever. And so all I'm saying is that stop getting so spun out of shape about foolishness.
Mhm.
Listen, if you did something so grand, you would be worthy of a clap too.
Mhm.
You will be worthy of people saying that you know what, let's go back to what the original conversation was like. Let's go back to the original statement. Let's go back to the original founder. Let's go back to the original of that. And we call it source. And let's see what it says there and how it's been changed, or how it's been augmented, how it's been whatever to now. This is why independent Scientology was founded or started, because it needed to say, wait, where is what do we really have here that has been perverted, been changed, been altered?
Mhm.
And if so, let's see what the original thing says and claps to that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to give credit where credit is due. There's no doubt
Right.
about that. And I was 19 at the time and never gone to church, that type of thing. When you go to church, what are you doing? What are you doing? I mean,
You're worshiping.
you're
Yeah.
worshiping. Okay. So
Yeah.
what's wrong with that? Why is that
No.
okay and this is not okay?
Right. Well, because they would say, well, you're worshiping a man who was born in 1930 something, 1920 something, whatever. You're worshiping a man who was a man, and he, was on a boat, and
Mhm.
he had children, and he did this and he did that. You're worshiping a man. And I say again, if you understood what worship really was, worship is not about adoration.
Mhm.
Worship is about understanding that this person is I'm sorry, worship is about adoration. It's about understanding that a person is worthy of their wares, of their
Mhm.
work.
Mhm.
And Beyonce is worshiped. I don't care what nobody say. Michael Jackson was worshiped. I don't care what nobody say.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and again, I'm not saying that I'm saying I understand it for what it is. I'm not saying that one should or should not worship LRH. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying understand it for what it is. And if you really clear the word, you would know what I'm talking about. Other thing is that if you really look at the way things are unfolding in our society today, LRH was kind of prophetic too. when you
Well,
when you
yeah,
look at
yeah, yeah.
okay,
He had a lot of good things to say about a lot of topics, and is it that remember that expression,
should
things
probably
that
read
make
it.
that song, things that make you go,
Hmm.
He was really, really, really good at that sort of a thing. And it's interesting to note that when you're talking about worship and what the definition of worship really means, what the definition of fan and fanatic is. I mean, it's so overused. I'm a fan of this. I'm a fan of Star Wars. I'm a fan of this. It's if if you look at that and you go, okay, what people think it means, or they know that it means based off of something that they've been told that is erroneous or incorrect as a definition.
Right,
Well, what have you
right.
got? You've got two different things going on. My point is, this is what's happened to what LRH wrote, said, and said to do inside the corporate church of Scientology, is that they've changed these things for copyright reasons, control reasons, manipulation reasons, across the board over the last 40 plus years. And so it means something different. That's why we say he is source. Keep it the way that it was. Do what he says to do. He says it's a workable technology. He doesn't. He also says, there may be other technologies out there, but this is a workable technology as it is. 1965, keeping Scientology working. People go, oh well, he's just so out of hand and all this stuff. No, 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 no. He was saying this because everybody and their brother was trying to change this stuff across the planet before we had the internet. We were using landline phones. Yeah,
Oh my
they were
God.
using
Did they
mimeograph
have fax?
machines.
They didn't have. Did they have
Then,
fax machines back then or no?
then fax machines was in the 80s. I mean, this
Wow.
was a completely different time, and he had to put this down in writing and say you got to have the right technology. You got to stamp out of existence the incorrect technology, because it'll become unworkable, and then you've got nothing. And we're right
Right.
back in the soup where we started from, because somebody didn't understand the real word of worship.
Right.
It starts right there and ends right there with word clearing technology, something that he distilled down and found out was the basis of man's insanity. I'm
Yeah.
not kidding. I mean this seriously. Misunderstood words are the basis of man's insanity. That's why it was so important to him to keep the source materials the way they are. And here we are,
Mm-hmm.
what, 73 years on from 1950.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And look what's happening to the corporate church of Scientology. We got the survival rundown that was written by somebody else, and LRH said, put that shit away. I didn't write that. Don't use it again. Take it out of the books. And then Miscavige comes along and puts it out there, and people die from the survival rundown because they're so freaking overrun on objectives when it was not something Hubbard said to do in the first place. I know five people that have died while on the survival rundown who were nowhere near end of their body limitations, 70, 80, 90, 100 type of thing. Nowhere near it,
Right.
because it was incorrectly used and people were run into the ground to the point of body death. So this is why, and that is a brief example of how bad things can go wrong when you alter the technology.
Wow. Listen, I, for anybody who's listening to this podcast, you already know, like, I started this, I'll call it a debate earlier with Jonathan about whether or not Scientology is even a religion or, whatever, whatever. And I'm going to say this. If you really look at life objectively, you see kind of things happening over and over again. You see things showing up somewhere. I just use the example of Beyonce, Michael Jackson, whoever. I just use the example like you see things happening in certain ways, and people have no quirks or qualms about certain things in certain areas. But in other areas, it becomes kind of weird or wonky. All I'll say is this. I'm so glad that I have been able to find Scientology, use it to better my life in a real way, and ultimately now being on lines with the Independent Church of Scientology, Independent Scientology rather, with AOGP, like knowing that I have some workable technology and using it day in, day out to make my life better, it's been totally life changing for me. I want to end us off with the actual creed of Scientology. Because like, what is this really whole thing about? I want to end us off with this because I think that when we think about the tech and we think about these different, bridge and the dynamics and we kind of see these chunks of stuff that I could use, and that's fantastic. But what's the bigger purpose?
The larger
What's
arc.
the bigger, yeah, what's the larger arc of it all?
Mhm.
So can we go through that real quickly?
Sure.
Um
How about I read it?
and yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So this is the creed of the Church of Scientology, and feel free to just jump right in if you want
And
to.
it was like September 18, 1954, Larry wrote this.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Starts off with, we of the church believe that all men of whatever race, color, or creed were created with equal rights, that all men have an inalienable or inalienable rights to their own religious practice and their performance, that all men have inalienable rights to their own lives, that all men have inalienable rights to their sanity. Super, super important there. That all men have inalienable rights to their own defense, that all men have inalienable rights to conceive, choose, assist, and support their own organizations, churches, and governments, that all men have inalienable rights to think freely, to talk freely, to write freely their own opinions, and to counter or utter or write upon the opinions of others, that all men have inalienable rights to the creation of their own kind, that the souls of men have the rights of men, that the study of the mind and the healing of mentally caused ills should not be alienated from religion or condoned in non religious fields. Page 2.
Mhm.
And that no agency less than God has the power to suspend or set aside these rights overtly or covertly. And we of the church believe that man is basically good, that he is seeking to survive, that his survival upon himself and upon his fellows and his
His
attainment of
survivor
brotherhood.
depends.
Oh, sorry. Let me
It's
do
a,
that again.
mhm.
That his survival depends upon himself and upon his fellows and his attainment of brotherhood with the universe.
Yes.
And we of the church believe that the laws of God forbid man to destroy his own kind, to destroy the sanity of another, to destroy or enslave another's soul, to destroy or reduce the survival of one's companion or one's group. And we of the church believe that the spirit can be saved and that the spirit alone may save or heal the body.
This is so amazing. Let me tell you, when I first read this, the creed, I got emotional.
Mhm.
And two things that stood out for me. Obviously, the part about that we in the church believe that the laws of God forbid man to destroy and enslave another soul. That really rang true for me as a person of color. And that, what was the other one? Oh, that his survival depends upon himself and upon his fellows and his attainment with brotherhood with the universe. So we talked about the eight dynamics. That's the eight dynamics is kind of set up in that
Yeah.
line right there.
Yeah, it
His
is.
survival depends upon himself, his fellows, and his attainment of brotherhood with the universe. But I saw that as so much bigger. Even maybe I just didn't understand the eight dynamics at the time, how big it really was. But like, man's survival, our survival depends upon, number one, ourselves. Get yourself together.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm. All
Number
starts with the
two,
first dynamic.
right. Number two, your fellows, the people around you, help other people get themselves together. And three, one's attainment of brotherhood with the universe. That blew my mind right there because I had never heard it that way. I had always come from like I said, a conservative background or whatever. I had always heard like, God gonna do it. God'll fix it. He'll fix it. Whatever, whatever.
Mhm.
And but when you get it, like when we attain brotherhood with the universe, you can change things. things.
Mm-hmm.
We can fix things. Something can be done about it. And that made me feel so good just hearing that.
Mm-hmm.
What stood out to you?
Well, it basically says that we need to treat one another the way we want to be treated, and that you need to have respect for your fellow man, and you need to have respect for yourself equally, and
Mm-hmm.
do unto others as you would have done unto you is really what a lot of it is about. But it has to do with sanity, and not allowing anybody to perturb, aberrate other people, and that you need to stand up and you need to protect one another and take care of one another and yourself. And that I mean, it to me, I don't think you could have put it better at all,
Yeah.
as to what the standpoint is what we're trying to do here. Scientology, the subject,
Right.
Scientology, the corporate entity, is you know I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. There are a lot of really good people that are still in the corporate church of Scientology, and I would love for them to listen to these podcasts and understand that we are not the enemy. We are not the
Yeah.
enemy. You are just being duped by an organization that is wholly and completely corrupted by those who have taken it over. And LRH's intentions are no longer being visited there in any way, shape, or form. It is a facade. Pretty buildings do not a good soul make. It takes work. It takes work. You have to confront yourself. You have to confront your fellow man. You have to love your fellow man, embrace them, help them, right, raise them up, and raise yourself up, and ask them to help you too, and have compassion. That's what Scientology is about. It is the most compassionate subject for the human spirit that I've ever come across. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good stuff, a lot of good stuff in the Bible, a lot of good stuff in the Quran. You know, I am not invalidating other people's viewpoints at all, but I am saying that what we believe and what we know, this stuff works, and it is there to help people. It is not there to dumb them down, manipulate them, blind them, take their money from them. It is here to help. And this guy spent 40 years riding, slaving over, perfecting this stuff and putting down the way to do these things for a road out. This is what I know. This is what I believe. I see it every day in session. I've got another auditing session here in 30 minutes, and I'm going to be taking another person in, and I'm going to be changing their life for the better, hour by hour, intensive by intensive, 12 and a half hour blocks. And they will
Yeah.
never be the same again. And it is the most redeeming subject and thing that I could ever do in my life. I love my job.
Amazing. How many people get to say that? This has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate you for letting me be a part of it. I want
Love
to end
having you.
off. Thank you. I want to end off by saying something that to you, those of you who made it through this podcast, who got to the end here, um, the concept of forward vector in Scientology, it talks about this action of progress that a person makes towards their goals, towards spiritual development, towards getting in session, towards doing what you have to do to improve your life. And so I want to encourage each of you, just in this conversation, to just be forward vector about your life, be forward vector about your auditing, be forward vector about your spiritual progress. Read a book, take a course on the website, go contact the organization and get some auditing set up or whatever. Be forward vector about this, because the momentum that you start right now, forward vector, the momentum that you start right now will carry you through barriers, will carry you through obstacles, will carry you through problems, will carry you through if you allow it to. But you got to start. And that's what I want to say before we close out.
Well put. Well, folks, we've reached the end of another podcast here. Got to get in session. We'll see you next time here on Scientology Outside of the Church. I'm here with Quentin Stroud, and we will see you next week. Have a great weekend. Namaste, and we love you.